The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to the People's View.
Hello and welcome. Today we have Dave Schoneman, who's running for Alderman in Ward 3. Dave, you're running again, so you must have enjoyed your first 2 years.
I did, Carl. It was a great experience.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's really amazing once you get involved in politics, particularly local politics, when you see the dynamics that go on between a mayor and the individual members of the Board of Aldermen, and between your constituents too. And you try to figure out what the job's all about. It's not about policy from very high altitude, analogy that's often used. It's not. It's working down in the weeds with people who need stop signs and potholes filled and speed limits changed and parking issues addressed. It's really about constituent services and about representation.
So what do you think, if you formed 3 major things that you want to do in your next term? You get elected? That's
a good question, and I'm happy to answer it. The things that I focused on in my first term, I think are resonating well. These are things that I've learned from talking to people, knocking on doors and chatting with them on the doorsteps. I think people are looking for 3 things. Number 1 is representation. I ran on representation in 2013, and I promised that I would represent people to the best of my abilities. It's not up to me to go into the Board of Aldermen and have a favorite department or a favorite union that I advocate for. My job is to advocate for the constituent, to represent their views to the city. The mayor, that's an executive role. The mayor brings policy, brings new ideas, and it's hashed out at the Board of Aldermen level. And my job is to listen to what the people in Ward 3 say and to present their views, not my own. So representation is number 1. Number 2, the most important thing that I've heard from people is that they don't like seeing their tax rate go up continually without an improvement in services. Mayor Lozo had a very good presentation at the public hearing for the budget this summer. She spoke about tax rates and payroll and pensions and actual services provided. If you were to draw a graph, you would see the tax rate over the last 8 years has gone up consistently. If you graphed payroll, you'd see payroll going up consistently. If you graphed pensions, pensions ramp up. If you graph operational expenses, which is really what services are provided, flatlined. So here we have taxes up, public employee payrolls up, public employee pensions up, and services flat. People don't like that. So I've put effort into limiting expenses, limiting spending, so that we can try to keep that tax rate low. It's not low now. In fact, people say that the tax rate has been stable. The tax rate has not been stable. Tax rate has gone up roughly 2 to 2.5% every year. The growth in the tax rate is stable, and it's too high. I think people don't like that. So number 1, representation. Number 2, the thing that I need to represent to the city is that we don't want taxes to escalate the way they have. And third thing is constituent services. What do people need? I got a call today about parking on a very small street in my ward. The call came in because the woman who called knows that snow is going to be coming. It's very hard to navigate a street, and she wants that addressed. I've had all kinds of parking issues, all kinds of potholes and streets and trash collection, these kinds of things. So really, the 3 things that I think a ward alderman in particular is responsible to do, what I have promised to do last time and I promise again to do this time, is to represent the constituents, to manage spending, and to provide good constituent services.
Well, you brought up one thing there, potholes and stuff. Do you think that the road plan, that the road fixing plan or building plan that the current mayor has put into effect is going to really resolve some of those problems, those potholes?
I'm on the budget committee. We heard the plan on Monday evening. It's a $17 million bond to pave the major arteries within Nashua in the next 2 years. I think that it's an ingenious plan in the sense that the CDBG or the block grants, the highway block grants, will pay for principal and interest over the course of 15 years, 15-year bond. The concern I have is that the roads may not last the full 15 years. Roads, the way they want our plan to be built, will be about 12
Especially
to 15
Amherst
years.
Street,
So we
yeah.
may end up needing to replace our roads while we're still paying for them. That would not be good. There's also the possibility that the state could reduce the money that they give us every year. I don't know if that's going to happen. Probably not likely, but who knows? We're basically, the $17 million is borrowing against that
Yeah.
future income stream from the state.
The state's doing the same thing.
Right, we're borrowing against an income stream
Right.
that may not exist. So I don't want to borrow against a stream that just suddenly disappears. Now we're stuck paying for it. My third concern with that is that it sort of bunches the work. We have all these streets being repaved now, if we do it in the next 2 years, and they're going to need to be repaved again in 15 years or so. And so we're going to be facing a big nut down the road in 15 years. I'd rather see something staggered. I like the bonding idea. It's very interesting. I don't want to borrow against a 15-year stream. I'd like to borrow perhaps a smaller amount and stagger that in some way. I just think there are better ways to do it. There's all kinds of possibilities. One person who spoke in public comment at the end of the meeting on Monday pointed out that the interest on that 15-year bond is $4.7 million. $4.7 million. If we are paving $1 million a year, that's almost 5 years of paving
Right.
that we're giving up just in interest payments. And granted, we get the streets fixed immediately, and there's a certain benefit and to that immediacy. But I think we need to think about it a little more. I drove some of those roads, and although they're not in great condition, they're not in dire shape, in my personal opinion. I don't maintain them, so maybe the guy who maintains them says they're in dire shape. But I don't see them being in dire shape. And if it's not an emergency, let's think about it and plan it and work out a solution that I think protects us against that, the income stream disappearing, and doesn't have all the roads come due in 15 years.
Does our highway department look to the state highway department to see how they do? Because they have a series of ways of looking at the roads based on traffic. Okay, so heavy traffic like Route 3, probably every 2 or 3 years they're doing something to it. Whereas some of the residential roads, maybe they last 15, 20 years.
A residential road, yeah, it's not paved to the same depth, it's not
Right.
repaved to the same depth, but it doesn't have the traffic, you're absolutely right. It doesn't have heavy vehicles in most cases. The city has a sense, we have a software program that kind of tells us what's happening with the roads. We're upgrading that. We're improving it, and I think we're going to be getting a new data set in there for this program to evaluate. I think it's wise to evaluate it and really see which roads need to be, because we can think about it and say, well, Amherst Street or Concord Street, these are obviously high traffic roads, but let's actually do the analysis. Those roads are probably built stronger, so just because they're high traffic doesn't mean they're higher wear necessarily. So I think we do need to analyze it just the same way the state does. We are investing in this program. It'll be online in the next 6 months to a year, from what I understand. I could be wrong on those dates. But it'll be online, and we can use that to determine which roads to do.
Is that similar to what the state uses?
I imagine so. I'm not completely familiar with what the state uses, but it analyzes traffic and load and those kinds of things.
One thought comes to mind. The state is doing a 10-year program again, the plan. So by June, we'll have a plan, which is what we say we have 10-year plans at what we're going to do, but we really only have probably less than 5 years of money to do it.
Well,
and you're going to have the same problem. But the
yes.
reason I bring it up, now is the time to put your 2 cents in for some major roads that the state normally takes care of, and in your area. In fact, I think either next week or the week after, the 10-year plan is being discussed in Merrimack.
Oh.
And you might want to go to that and hear what they're thinking anyway.
I think that's a good idea. Many of the roads that we pave, that Nashua paves, are actually state highways.
Right.
We learned that the other night too. We've got Route 101, we've got Route 111. These are state roads
Right.
that we're responsible to pave. And if the state could pave some of those, I think
Well,
that'd be a good idea.
you do get something for doing that.
Yes, we do.
And I think you'll get a better understanding if somebody, I would assume the highway department really pays attention to what's going on up at the state level. And the same thing with bridges. I know they probably had something to do with that bridge that you had on Concord Street. It was just replaced, I guess it is.
On Manchester Street?
Manchester Street.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
They're still doing some work on that road.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a nice new bridge. Looks
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So, what do you think about some of the other issues that were brought up at your meeting? I guess it was Monday that I missed because I was away.
The Aldermanic Forum
All right.
was on Tuesday evening, hosted by the Chamber of
Tuesday
Commerce.
evening,
Yeah,
yeah.
Tuesday evening. A number of ideas come up. One of which I would like to share. I heard Alderman candidate Dan Richardson point out. We were talking about marketing the city and what Nashua should be known for. And he pointed out that Nashua should be known for its parks and its waterways. And I've heard people talk about parks, and we've talked about all the different parks, we talked about the waterways, but it was very interesting to me and clicked in a way I hadn't clicked before to hear them in one sentence. Parks and waterways. It creates this image in my mind of a small town, small New England town, even though we're a city. It creates this image of peace and relaxation and recreation. And I think we have a lot of parks. We have great waterways that we have not taken full advantage of. One of my constituents is working adamantly, very, very diligently, trying to improve access to the waterways. I think it's a great idea. So marketing the city for the assets it already has, as opposed to trying to find new things to bring in and then market them, because we already have parks. We already have waterways. I like that a lot, marketing the city on that basis. There's also a lot of discussion about the potential for rail in Nashua, potential for an arts center. Mostly rail was discussed on Tuesday. And there are a lot of differing opinions on that. My personal view, and I think the view that's shared by my constituents in Ward 3, is that rail would be a good idea. How are we going to pay for it? And again, just like the paving plan we spoke about a moment ago, there's a way to maybe phase that in so that we can determine if it really is going to be good before we invest in a full program. An idea would be to maybe see if MBTA in Massachusetts will bring the rail up to the border. If they do that, and we can build the exit 36 southbound off of Route 3 so that commuters from Nashua can drive easily to a park and ride facility right on the line, I think that would be a good thing to do. We'll see how that works. And then if the ridership warrants it and the funds are there, then we can begin bringing it up. But my personal view is that as of right now, we don't have a sound plan for how we're going to pay for it. And I just don't feel that our population density, it's just not there yet to warrant it. I've lived in Somerville and Cambridge. I've commuted in New York City. You ride those subways, I mean, there's a density there that necessitates that kind of public transportation. I've also ridden the bus from Nashua, the park and ride at Exit 8, down to Logan Airport. It stops at South Station on the way. There have been times when I've been one of 2 or 3 people on that bus. And when I got picked up at Logan Airport to come back up, I was the only guy on the bus. So until we see that the opportunities for transit are being taken full advantage of, I can't see how we're going to be able to justify the cost. And I don't think that the people in Ward 3 would like it if I voted for something like that. Now, if they want it, and they want to tell me that they want it, that's one thing. But it's very difficult. I mean, people want to ride the train. Taking the train to Logan, taking the train to Manchester Airport, it's a great idea. But getting from here to there and paying for it is a big problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that plan that was voted down up in the state legislature went a step too far, I think. They had a good idea in it, though, of having as a transportation center down there, bringing it up to the border. That was phase 1. So, I agree that we should look into that a little bit, because there's no good east-west transportation going through this area for southern. And the other thing I think the people have to understand is that we're just Nashua. We're less than 5% of the population, and there's a lot of people that are going to be having to pay some of the state costs on this. So they're not anxious to do that.
No, they're not anxious to do that. And one of the arguments that it's often made is that, well, we subsidize roads, and the people in North subsidize the roads, but they use the roads.
That's right.
In fact, there's probably nobody in the state of New Hampshire that doesn't depend on the road to some extent.
That's right.
Even if they walk to the store, their
Yeah.
food got to the store by a road. So everybody benefits from roads. And so the fact that we subsidize roads is fine. But not everybody will benefit from rail. Something else that I think is sometimes missed is that although we subsidize the roads, we don't subsidize the purchase of the vehicle, the insurance for that vehicle, the gasoline for that vehicle, the maintenance for that vehicle. That's all borne by the person who uses that car. And with the train, none of that. I mean, the individual doesn't buy the train engine. It's not practical to do so. But to compare and say roads or airports or whatnot are subsidized, therefore it's okay to subsidize a train, we only subsidize a portion of the system on roads. Because you buy your own car, I buy my own car, had maintenance done, the car inspected, it cost me some money. I bear that. I don't have the state bear that for me. I don't have the people in the north pay my bills for that. So the state subsidies or federal subsidies for roads are practical. It's a necessary thing, and I think everybody benefits from that. But right now, I don't see the folks in Pittsburgh wanting to subsidize rail here in Nashua.
That's Pittsburgh and New Hampshire.
Pittsburgh and New Hampshire, yes, of course. That's what I mean. Pittsburgh, beautiful town.
Anyway, you're talking about the river thing. I like that idea too. This could be a mini San Antonio.
It could be.
Yeah, you don't want to think of it, as big as that, but just that area, a couple of blocks long, could be something that we would support, and could be a influx of people that come in and enjoy an evening there or a weekend day there. And I think they'd run some programs that would take advantage of the river.
I think so too. I mean, we used to have a boat ride apparently in the river. I'd like to see that kind of thing reinstituted. There was a mill building that was recently purchased on Franklin Street, and the company that bought that building wants to further develop that riverfront area. And I think that's great. If we can revitalize that, then people will come for that. To say that people are only going to move here if we have a train station, there's so much more that we have. And we have these assets right now. We have a lot of parks. And we were talking about Greeley Park 2 years ago and all the controversy surrounding that. We did a lot of research on all the parks. We have a lot of parks in Nashua. And we have great waterways. And to take advantage of those, I think would be really a great thing. And I give that credit to Dan Richardson.
Okay.
He spoke the words first. It really resonated with me.
Well, Nashua has some problems that other towns in the state have too. The drug problem's a big one that I've been thinking about. Have you any thoughts along that line? How would we improve the situation?
The drug problem it's a very serious problem. It's heartbreaking. When you read a story, you think about what a young person went through and what grief that situation, that loss has brought to a family, to the parents. I just can't imagine it. It's a real tragedy. The problem has been escalating, and accelerating. And I just saw in a paper the other day that we've set a record number of overdoses and a record number of deaths in 2015. And that's very sad. I'm not sure that the efforts that we're putting into place or attempting to put into place are really going to solve the problem. It's not necessarily a matter of more policing. Police department has told us we cannot enforce our way out of this problem. We cannot arrest our way out of this problem. There's talk about rehab and preventative programs and treatment and mandatory treatment, all kinds of things, counseling. Those things are valuable. However, I don't think that they get to the core issue. The core issue, when someone is by themselves and deciding, am I going to do this or not do it? Years ago, there was this slogan, just say no. Well, it's not easy to just say no. It's very hard to just say no. At that moment when the person is deciding, am I going to do this or not do it, the only thing that helps them to just say no has to come from within. It doesn't come from a threat of arrest. It doesn't come from a guidance counselor who's not there. It doesn't come from a parent who's not there at that moment. It has to come from inside. During the mayoral debates, one of the mayoral debates, I heard candidate Moriarty say something I thought was very astute, very present. He said that we have destigmatized the use of drugs. And we live in a society today where things that are harmful have, to some extent, been destigmatized. Now, I'm not saying we have to call a person bad, but the person who is contemplating doing it should know that doing that drug is bad. It's a morally bad thing to do. Because that's the only thing that's going to stop them at that moment, when they're by themselves and making that choice, this direction or that direction.
A little self-discipline.
A little self-discipline. We have all kinds of programs, 12-step programs that work for alcohol abuse, work for drug abuse. These things have been proven to work. In prisons, where people are serving time for drug problems or for crime committed because of a drug problem, many times the prisons have programs there, 12-step programs, to help teach somebody how to not do the same thing again. These programs have a spiritual element, I'll call it, where they're hearing perhaps for the first time that they may have a higher power, that there might be something that can help them at that moment of temptation in the middle of a dark night. And my thinking is, why do we wait for the person to be in prison before we let people think, hey, maybe there's a higher power here that you can reach out to and gain some strength, because we don't have the strength in and of ourselves to choose really right from wrong all the time at that dark, lonely moment, because those dark, lonely moments exist. I grew up in a home where there was some alcohol abuse. My father, who I love dearly, he's been gone now for a while, he had a drinking problem. And I've seen it. He didn't do it intentionally. He did it because he just couldn't stop it. The only times that he did better was when he was involved in a program like that. And so my feeling is, why wait?
That's right.
Why can't we have a 12-step program in the high schools where people sit down and talk about their issues, talk about a higher power? It's not my God versus your God. It's not a religious thing, but it's a sense that we're not alone in the universe, and we're not facing our problems by ourselves.
Yeah, but you think some of this attitude of keeping religion out of the schools or out of any kind of governmental action is hindering that kind of approach?
It is, but again, we do it in prisons. Prisons are government run.
Right.
Why wait till we...
I agree with you.
You know, I think that if we do it in prison,
Right.
why can't we do it in school? It benefits the guys in
Catch it,
prison.
well, before they
Why don't
get-
we try it before they get to prison?
That's right.
Before they go down that path, so that when they're facing that choice, they have something inside of them that says, you know what, I'm not going to do this because it's wrong. And they have a sense of strength that comes from outside of themselves. That's my personal view. And I know it's a societal thing, but I think all the money we're going to spend is not going to stop that, because we spent all this
This
money.
better way. Yeah, this is a much better way. You get it before it really starts.
I think so. And if these programs worked, I mean, if the things that we're talking about doing now worked, I'm not sure we'd be seeing the escalation that we're seeing now. But we're seeing an escalation in drug use that matches the loss in society of any kind of moral compass.
Yeah, well, I see the destigmatization situation too, by people who are pushing to have marijuana use as a legal drug in certain small quantities. I think that's a little bit of opening the door to get too many people in. It's just like some of the pain medication that's being used now.
Yes.
People are using that just whenever they feel bad, not when they have a problem, medical problem. So I think we have to pay attention to that and say, look, medical marijuana, maybe, if you have strict controls with it. So you can see what's happening in some of those states that are legalizing recreational marijuana. I think we have to watch that, because that could lead to, the next step.
It certainly could. It certainly could. And I think that we should give young people all the tools, all the things that we can possibly give them to help them face those choices in their lives.
I saw that, this is 60 years ago when I was in high school, okay? There was a drug problem in the New York area at that time, but there was a stigma to it. The druggies, they did their thing over there. The non-druggies were in a different area.
Right.
So there was a separation. People recognized the difference. And as you say, it's a moral issue. It's what's right and what's wrong.
It is, and those are choices that people make, on their own. And I would just like to. It's heartbreaking to see the trends that we have seen
It is.
in the last 6 months, 18 months. It's just unbelievable.
A lot of our treasure that we're losing.
I know. And I think that we should stop at nothing.
Right.
So if these programs work in prison, let's try them earlier before
Very good.
person
Yeah.
gets to that point. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Well, I hope you succeed in getting some of those programs across. And I know we have a lot of nonprofit organizations that work in different aspects of these problems. Do you think there's something that we could push along that already exists and just need a little bit of publicity or financial help?
The anonymous program, the 12-step programs, work independently. They pride themselves on working independently, not being political. I think that they succeed based on individual contributions at that level. I think that it never hurts for people to hear that those kinds of options exist.
Yeah, it's in the publicity.
Just the
people don't-
publicity, I think, is a good thing. Because you can go to the phone book, you can go online, you can find an AA or probably a Narcotics Anonymous program somewhere. I read somewhere in the paper that there's a woman who had an issue with heroin, and she's starting a narcotics, some kind of anonymous heroin anonymous program in her town. I forgot what town it was in, but I think that's great. These things exist, and if we can let people know and point them in that direction, I think from an education standpoint in the schools, I think there'd be great benefit to understanding that those programs exist and why they're so successful, because they are successful. The rate of people getting back into an addictive behavior once they got out of it, it's there. It isn't like the problem is solved and gone away. It's a day-to-day. That's why they say one day at a time. It's a daily struggle. And some people do fall back into it, but maybe they come back out of it again. So it's not a perfect program, but I think it's better than arresting them. It's better than putting them in jail. It's better than them having an overdose in a restroom.
Well, David, we're almost out of time, but do you
Wow.
need any help in campaigning?
Well,
Let the people know. This is your opportunity to tell them
Wow.
where to call if you want a couple
well, I would
of
certainly
people to
be
pass
glad
out
to hear
literature.
from folks. I have an email address. It's david.schoneman@gmail.com. I have a website. That's nhthinks.com. And I have a telephone number, too. My telephone number is 809-5204. I'd be very glad for people spreading the word. These are not expensive races. I don't need the money. I'm not asking for money. Anyone who would be willing to have a sign in their yard, I'd be very, very grateful for. I've got a bunch of signs out there. I want to get more signs out. If you want a sign in Ward 3, please call. I would be glad to put it there, and I promise to pick it up day after the election.
Okay.
But having signs and spreading the word is a huge, huge help.
Well, very good, Dave. And the audience should realize that these interviews of the candidates for the local election will be shown the week before
Right.
the election. And if you have any questions, you can contact the NashuaGOP.org. That's our website, and we'd be happy to hear from you. The Nashua Republican City Committee meets the second Thursday of every month in the Crown Plaza Amphitheater Room. Thank you for listening in. And thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Carl. It's a pleasure to be here.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.